Today is May 1st, 2021. Let me ask you a question. Jesus ascended up from the Mount of Olives. So when he comes back at the second coming, where is he going to come down to? Well, a lot of people, they'll read Acts chapter 1, verse 11. And it says, "Which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven." Let's turn over to Zechariah chapter 14, verse 4, and it says, "And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem." Now, it didn't say that he was going to descend down from heaven to the Mount of Olives, though that is what is usually taught. Now, back in Acts, it continues to speak in verse 12, "Then returned they unto Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet." Now, before we go any further, just to keep in mind so that you know where we're talking about on this particular talk that I'm going to do, this is a map of Israel, and you can see there at the bottom is a section called Edom, and then above that is Moab, and then above that is Ammon, and then you see Jerusalem right here at the top of the Dead Sea. Now keep that in mind. Where's Jerusalem? Where's Edom? Where's Moab? And even where's Ammon? Now, if we turn back to the major prophet of Isaiah, Isaiah says, "Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra?" These are dyed in blood. "This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thine garments, and the garments like him that treadeth in the wine vat? I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment." Well, what I'd like to say is Jesus doesn't come down to Jerusalem. He comes down to Edom, and then he's on a battle march on the way to Jerusalem, and at that day his feet will stand in the Mount of Olives. Now, obvious question, why does he not come straight down to Jerusalem? Why does he go to Edom? Well, there's a particular people there in Edom. Now, if we turn over to Revelation chapter 12, verse 6, it says, "And the woman," now that's symbolic language for Israel, "and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days," or 3.5 years. Well, this is taking place at the end of the Great Tribulation, and this is Israel fleeing the great anti-Semitic persecution of the Antichrist, which hates and wants to destroy Israel. So they're there in this place, and I believe it's in Edom. Edom also is near a place called Moab. And back in Daniel, it talks about the Antichrist, and it says in Daniel 11:41, "He, the Antichrist, shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon." Remember, I showed you that on the map, how they're on the east side of the Dead Sea. Lower part below the Dead Sea is Edom, and then Moab, and then Ammon. And this is where God is going to hide Israel during the last half of the Great Tribulation period. Moab was also a hiding place for that was used by David, not for himself, but for his mother and father. In 1 Samuel 22, verse 3, it says, "And David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you till I know what God will do for me." So he wanted his parents to be safe, so he took them to this area of Israel, a hiding place called Moab, Mizpah, the city, and then Moab. And then right below that is Edom. This is where God is going to hide the entire nation of the believing Jews of Israel during the last half of the Great Tribulation. So instead of coming down to Jerusalem, which the Bible doesn't say, though it has been taught that way, read it closely. It doesn't say he's come down to Jerusalem. It says that at that day his feet shall stand in Jerusalem, but not immediately coming down. He'll come down to Edom, march to Jerusalem, and at that day his feet shall stand at the Mount of Olives. Hope this has been enlightening.